Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I do these every Friday at 2:30 UK time, just as the US markets are opening. Interesting week this week. It's been a good week for me this week. Better than a couple of other weeks in April. I was long the S&P coming into today. I've just got stocked out. I think it's going to be a really interesting day in US markets today because we have had this recovery going on. I suppose since last Friday, since late last Friday, but we have seen this market try to recover. But I do wonder, will we see some nerves again ahead of the weekend? So I think it's interesting anyway to see what happens there. So we'll see what happens with that. Other markets, we've got gold, a little bit of a bounce back. Oil has woken up a little bit over the last day or so. But as usual, you know what we do in these. I'll have a look at the major announcements for next week. There's quite a bit next week, bit of a busy week. We'll go through the major markets, indices, FX, commodities, gold, silver, oil, gas, all that. And then if there's any stuff you want looking at, if you put it in the chat on YouTube, then I will we'll look at those when we've looked at everything else. I'm doing a special webinar next week. A new one for me that you can attend. I'll give you the details as we go through. There is a catch, of course. There's always a catch, but I'll talk about that in a second. But first of all, let's get the risk warning out of the way. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how to spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Sorry, excuse me for a second. I just realised, because the markets are open, I've not looked at all my stock trades, and Google had a big move last night, didn't it? I just wanted to see where everything was opening. All right, that's fair enough. We'll have a look at those in a bit more detail. All right, so there's the risk warning done and out of the way. So this webinar, I'm doing a webinar next Wednesday, 1st of May, 7 p.m. in the evening, UK time. We're on summertime over here. And in the webinar, you know, I talk a lot about medium-term and longer-term trading, and that's still the core of my trading. I'll talk more about that as we go through today. But I've also been day trading all this year. So day trading for me is not necessarily in and out the same day. Like yesterday, I did a trade yesterday on the S&P that I would class as a day trade for me. I bought it at 5,000 yesterday down here, and I've just come out of it now. So for me, day trading means a couple of days trading. And I've been doing it sort of intensely since January because I wanted to do a bit more during the day. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ. So the webinar is going to cover my approach, successfully day trading US indices, Dow, S&P and NASDAQ next Wednesday evening. Going from planning the trade, what do I look at? You know, I've got a routine I go through at least half an hour before the market opens, the official open, which is now 2:30 UK time. What's important and what's not. I think it's very easy to get swayed by all the news and everything else that happens throughout the day. So how I, you know, really set up the levels I want to trade at, where my stop's going to go, obviously the most important bit, and the stuff I just ignore. Why people lose, you know, we know that people lose. 75% of people lose trading. I think one of the reasons, I've said this before, they lose is because people are too short term. So I think if you're a short term trader, you're even more likely to lose. But I'll talk a bit about that and just go through my approach. So the plan is to run it for at least an hour, but there'll be questions as well. So basically for as long as people want to do it for. And when to take profits. You know, I came out of that one today, so I've just come out for about 82 points profit, I think, on the S&P. I mean, clearly it was a big move last night. That's the move last night. This is the 10-minute candle on the earnings last night. You know, but I was positioned from 5,000 on that, where I take profits. So I think it's going to be a really good session next Wednesday. What's the catch? The catch is it's the people in my WhatsApp group. So the ones who are in the WhatsApp group at the moment, they know about it. If you want to do it, you need to join the WhatsApp group. But if you join it for a month, you can get access to the webinar. More details on that as we go through. But that's That's next Wednesday evening. And, you know, if you know me, if you watched enough of my stuff, you know, I'm not one of these fantasists who sits there and talks about it. I do actually do it. I've done about 3 or 4 trades on the Dow, the Nasdaq, and the S&P this week. That latest one I've just closed as the biggest winner. I had a decent winner for the Dow earlier in the week. So we'll talk all about my methodology and the plan. And you'll be in the WhatsApp group for at least a month after, so you can ask for any support in that, but details as we go through. Right, next week, what is going on? Quite a lot is going on next week. So we've got EU inflation on Tuesday. Inflation data still very much a hot topic for markets. EU GDP, so how well or not is the European economy doing? That's on Tuesday. Wednesday is one of the bigger one, probably the biggest one for the week, US interest rate decision, Wednesday evening. There seems, you know, a lot of flip-flopping around rates at the moment. You know, I think if we go back 2 or 3 months, we were expecting, you know, decent rate cuts this year. And then markets aren't so sure. And I saw I think I read earlier this week that markets were pricing in a 20% chance of an interest rate rise. Let me find that story. I think it was on Reuters. I saw that story this week. The FT, there we go. Investor price in growing chance of another Federal Reserve interest rate rise. So that was from 3 days ago. So options market shows a 20% probability of increase. So it's still less likely, but it's a different position to that what we were in a month, 6 weeks ago. Anyway, so Wednesday night, US interest rate decision. Let's hear what they've got to say. And then on Friday, as if that wasn't enough for the week, we've got the non-farm payrolls. So the, what's it called? The unemployment numbers. So they'll be released an hour ahead of US market open on Friday. So when I do this at 2:30 on Friday, next Friday, they'll have been out for an hour. So we can normally expect some volatility ahead of that. So yeah, a lot to watch next week. Other stuff, just a quick plug for the WhatsApp group I do. I've been running this for about 16 months now. There's a daily update from me, what markets I think are interesting, what trades I've got running, what I'm doing with those trades, markets I'm watching for maybe another potential trade. I did say today the only thing I was watching really were the US markets as to how they opened this afternoon. We'll have a look at those. Talk about trades I'm running. I'm long copper at the moment. It's the second copper trade I've done this month because nice trend in copper. There we go. So I bought that the other week, came out. Where did I come out of it? In here somewhere. Bought back in again this week and it's done all right. So I talk about the trades that I'm running and any questions. You know, if people want to fire questions in about anything throughout the day, I'm more than happy to offer my opinion. If you sign up, you can sign up for a month. If you use the code YouTube, you get a 20% discount on the first month. And of course, if you sign up, you get access to next Wednesday's webinar. So if you go to the website, the link's down below, davidjonestrading.co.uk, go to subscribe, and there is the WhatsApp group. So basically, if you sign up for a month, you get access to this webinar for 40 quid, okay? And then the bonus is you get a month's worth of the WhatsApp as well. And even if you hate it, and most people don't, you can cancel. All right, so use the code YouTube. The link, as I say, to the website is in the description to the video. That's it. That's a snapshot. I think that's this morning actually, or early in the week. Early in the week that's the sort of thing I send out. So what was I talking about then? US indices, the Russell, smaller US, the FTSE, Bitcoin, gold, copper. So markets I felt interesting, and a little chart of the day. So that happens every day, and various updates from me throughout the day. 5-star Trustpilot reviews for the stuff I do. If you go to Trustpilot, David Jones Trading. I send out a newsletter every week. Haven't sent it out for a few weeks. I am going to send it out this weekend. That's free. So if you're not on the newsletter list, go to the website and put your email address in. And it's all on the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. Okay. That's it. And that's the webinar next week. So join the WhatsApp group, access to the webinar, blah, blah, blah. There you go. Right, let's have a look at these markets. I think it's been a really interesting week, and it's going to be really interesting to see where it all closes. So let's start off with stock market indices, okay? So, you know, for this month, the month looks like this. On the hourly charts, this is what the month looks like for the S&P. So it's been, this is the 31st of March. So we had fresh all-time highs in, I think that is the in-session market as well, on the 1st of April. But, for all of this month until last week, this market has been in a steady decline. So I think the interesting thing at the moment is, are we seeing a turnaround for this downtrend that's been in place? I don't know. Let's see what happens. But if we flip it over to the dailies, if we go back to the October 22 lows on the S&P, that trend is very much still in place. And then we have the trend that's accelerated since there, and it has fallen off since then, but we have held above the old support. So for me, 4,900, if you want to pick a level that I think is an important level, 4,900. I think if we go below there in the S&P, so it's less than a couple of hundred points below where we are now, less than 4% below where we are now, I think the risk is for a deeper sell-off. But the way I have been trading it this week, the S&P and the Dow, is basically buying the dips. And at the moment, I'd still be a dip buyer today. Let's see what happens today. But also, I put this in the WhatsApp group earlier on, completely valid to go short up here as well. Because we have got the trend that's been down all this month. And we have seen rallies not last this month so far. So I think it's really interesting what happens here. So absolutely the argument to be long or short, as I think there often is in markets. I would, for a short-term trade, if we saw the market sell off sharply today, I'd be a buyer in the next few hours. I wouldn't be buying it at 8 o'clock if it sold off sharply, 8 o'clock my time. But I think it's interesting to see what happens. Maybe we just have a bit of a chopper armor day because we had that big move because of Google and all the rest of them last night on the earnings. So let's see where it goes today. I'm just sneakily opening up all my stock trades just on this other screen so I can keep an eye on it. The other trade this week, I went long the Dow on Monday of this week. I don't trade the Dow hardly at all, but the Dow had a brilliant downtrend, very clean downtrend compared to the Nasdaq and the S&P, but had started rallying on Friday. I bought it on Monday in here somewhere, and it made a couple of 100 points. But interestingly, the Dow hasn't taken out these old highs from middle of April. So again, perfectly valid to think, well, this is a false break. This isn't the end of the trend, and these markets are going to turn down again. I was short the Nasdaq this week as well. I got stopped out by 15 points on the Nasdaq. I had my stop at, I think it was 17,625 or 650, 17,650. The market did trade to 17,665 and then dumped 450 points. So I missed out on that one this week, but overall a good week. And again, it's the same for the Nasdaq. There's the big trend. The big trend is up, obviously, since the beginning of last year. The market hit all-time highs in March and has backed off by about 8%, something like that. Is this just a retracement before the markets go off to the races again? I don't know, but interesting to see what happens. So yeah, a really interesting time in markets this week and going into next. Let's see where we are. Let's see how these things trade a bit later today. I mean, overall, what do I think overall? I don't know. I'm still a bit on the fence, to be honest. I think there have been some... Yesterday, I thought that was a really clear trade yesterday. I was a buyer at 5,000 yesterday in the S&P, and I thought we've had a couple of days of recovery. Perhaps it's an overreaction, and now I'm not so sure. So, but let's see what happens. But the big trends are definitely still up. The Russell, the smaller cap, I thought this was interesting. It moves a bit slower than the bigger indices. It has not been trending anywhere near as well. We've had pretty much sideways markets in the Russell since June of 2022. Broke out in December last year, sold off, broke out again into March. I would be a buyer. If I had to do a trade on the Russell, of course, a lot of this hinges on what everything else does, but I would be a buyer of that, and I'd want my stop the other side of 1900. So I think that's an interesting market. The Japanese market, bang on that trend. I mentioned this, I think, early in the week in the WhatsApp group. We'd seen all-time highs for the Nikkei in whenever it was, March, third week of March, sold off, and we come back to the trend, and we're still on that trend. and that's the trend from October 2023. And so it's a similar picture, I think, for a lot of these markets. You know, they're all in areas where if they're going to rally, they pretty much need to get a move on from where we are now. The DAX, I think I am short the DAX actually. I went short the DAX earlier this week. I'm underwater on that at the moment. Haven't been stopped out. A little bit of a messier market, the DAX. So I don't know on that. I think if we get a rally through 18.2, then I think I'll be looking for a run back to the all-time highs on the DAX. The FTSE here in the UK, we hit all-time highs in the FTSE this week. The FTSE, one of the most boring stock market indices in the world, because of the way it's made up, you know, because of the unique way it is constructed. Lots of defensive stocks in there. You know, we'll have a move on pound weakness, but all-time highs this week in the FTSE. Breakout in the FTSE through the 8,000 mark. I'd be a buyer of dips on the FTSE. You know, a bit scrappier trading. It's not as tidy a trend, I think, as other markets, but always interesting to watch. So that's where we are. All-time highs on that one. The Hong Kong index. I thought this was interesting. We had this downtrend in the Hang Seng since here, Jan 23. So other markets around the world last year going up, other stock markets. The old Hang Seng selling off. A couple of interesting things here this year. The market has held above the old lows from whenever that was, November 22. Has rallied, and we've taken out this downtrend. Is this the start of a turnaround in the Hang Seng? Who knows? But I think it is an interesting market to watch in the month ahead as well, that one. So I think for now, I would buy the dip on the Hang Seng. The closest I'd have my stop though is the other side of 16,000. So I think that is an interesting market as well to watch. The Nifty 50, the Indian market, it did break out to fresh highs in April. Been a bit sideways since then, but interesting overall. So there we go. Stock markets for me are a lot of my focus at the moment is stock markets. You know, I've still got the mix of various US stock trades running. Let's see what's moving today. Google. Look at that, Google. That is all-time highs, isn't it, on Google? Yeah, they had earnings out last night, Google. Microsoft, I was in those. I got stopped out yesterday. They had earnings last night. I would buy back into those. What's the big fallers today? DXM. I'm short DXCM. That's lucky. I'm short those because they've been bumping up against resistance. So yeah, that Google thing is interesting. I mean, clearly that was, you know, one of the reasons we had the big move in markets last night. Big gap higher today. You know, the official close yesterday was 157, opened at 174. You know, I have given back profit this month on my US stock trades. Here, you know, this is a little bit out of date, this spreadsheet. I think there's a couple more trades to be added into here. The prices are up to date. I've talked about this before on previous live streams this year, that a big focus for me was going to be US stocks this year. So I'm running about 50 trades at the moment, long and short on US stocks. Again, I talk about those in the WhatsApp group. This is based on about £200 risk per trade. So it's returned at its peak. It was up about 4,000 for the year so far. It's given back a bit of profit. It was much higher than that actually, but it's still up about 15% for the year to date on margin used. And it is a very relaxed approach. Some of the trades I've been in, like Google, I can't even remember when I did Google, 6th of Feb. So I've been in the Google trade since the 6th of Feb, bought them wherever I bought them. 144, and they're 174 at the moment. So they're up 1.7 times the risk. So there's some big winners in there, under pressure a bit during April. But yeah, so that's my US stock trading approach. So that's done all right, although I have given back profit in April. So I think stock markets are interesting. Let's see what happens up here today. I think if we see a strong close today, it does bode well for markets next week. You know, if we see a strong finish and it suggests that perhaps people are happy to hold over the weekend. Let's see what happens. So that's stock markets. Let's take a look at some currencies. The dollar index. If we look at on the dailies on the dollar index, the trend is still up. You know, the dollar index in April pushed to its best levels for the year so far, back to late October, early November levels. It's been a bit weaker since then, a bit drifty since then, but I would still, you know, buy the dip when the dip stops dipping in the dollar index. But yeah, a little bit drifty, as you can see. This is the hourly chart over the last week and a half. So nothing too exciting there for me. Pound against the dollar. That broke lower this week or over the last couple of weeks. On Monday of this week, we saw the pound at its worst levels since November of last year. I would sell this rally at the moment, not today, because it's still strong. I think that's an interesting one for next week. You know, if we believe the trend is down, which I do at the moment, if we look on the hourlies, there we go. It's perhaps a bit clearer there. I'd look to be a seller of this. So I think there's some interesting ones to watch, interesting levels to watch. You know, let's call it 126 on the pound. It's trading at 125.08 at the moment, so about 100 points higher than where we are now. Do we see the sellers come back in again? So I think that's an interesting market to watch next week, particularly given we have the US interest rate decision as well. So that's that. Euro is similar, Euro US dollar, there we go. So again, broke below this old support. You know, I would say the trend for the last, 6 weeks, nearly 2 months, is down on the euro. Looks like that. There you go. So I'd be a seller of the rallies. Dollar yen. I've not been paying attention to this, but I should have mentioned this before. But you know, that's a massive break in dollar yen. I think these are all-time highs, aren't they, in dollar yen? So broke out here to 152, and again a big day today for dollar yen, up near 157. So again in dollar yen, if I wanted to go long the dollar, and for me, dollar yen is probably the clearer market to trade because there is such such a good trend in dollar yen. So I'll be a buyer of the dip in dollar yen if it did actually dip. So yeah, great trend going on there in the dollar against the Japanese yen. Let's do Bitcoin while we're on the currencies. Bit boring, Bitcoin, over the last month or so, but you know, we've got support at 59,000. The trend since going back to here, Jan last year, the trend is up. Obviously, quite overextended from the trend. There's definitely scope for a bit of a sell-off. Let's see what happens. But I would buy the dip on Bitcoin. Just a little bit boring at the moment. Let's have a look at Ethereum. What does that look like? Yeah, the trend. I mean, the trend is still up on Ethereum as well. And if I was a buyer, I'd have a stop at least below 2,700, something like that. So not exactly a lot going on in currencies apart from dollar yen at the moment. Let's take a look at gold and silver. Gold, the trend is up. As we know, we had all-time highs for gold back here, middle of April. The trend is up. I buy the dip. I'd rather have a deeper dip to buy. But, you know, we sort of a brief sell-off this week below 2,300, and it has bounced back. So for me, in the short term, if I was a buyer of gold, I think the 2260 to sort of 2,300 area is an interesting one to watch. But yeah, the trend is absolutely up. Silver, a bit trickier. Silver, we looked at it last week. It did touch 30, which has been the high for a long time in silver. You know, we got to go back more than 10 years to see silver above 30. So, you know, is it going to break 30? I don't know. If I was a buyer today, you know, I'd want my stop probably the other side of $26. But if you thought it was going to smash through 30 and move higher, you know, it could still be an interesting trade from a risk-reward point of view. You know, and it has been trending higher this week. So that's maybe an interesting market to watch next week. Maybe it is time for silver's time in the sun is coming. Who knows? Let's see. Let's see what happens. So that's silver. Oil. I think oil's been a bit of a funny week for oil. Bit scrappy. If you look on the hourlies, there we go. So that's been, you know, the week or so for oil. But if we go back to the bigger picture, here we go. You know, the trend for oil is up since December of last year. So all this year, we've been seeing higher prices from oil. So it started at, where was it, $69, the lows-ish in December. And here we are at 84. So it's up 20% this year, the price of oil, isn't it? Is that right? Yeah, $15. Yeah, so for me, I'd be a buy the dip on oil. If I was a buyer off the dailies at the moment, the closest I would have my stop is below those mid-March lows, around about $80.70 on the oil cash. But the trend, you know, is still up for oil, I think, for the moment at least. So that's that. Natural gas, as usual, just bobbling along. Nothing too exciting to say about natural gas. You know, 156 has been the low for a couple of months now, 2.5 months, but it's not really doing much down there. So not too much excitement for me in that one. Heating oil, I think it's been a bit of a funny old time for heating oil. I've traded it a few times this year, a couple of times this year. I've done okay-ish, but you know, it's the trend. The trend has been up. This is going back to May 2023, but it never really gets a move on, and it just bumbles around. But I thought, you know, it was interesting that this week at least, you know, it's bumbled its way back to the lows for the year. You know, so again, if the price of heating oil was going to rally from anywhere, I think this is interesting down here. You know, the lows for the year and December are about 248, 250. So if it was going to get a move on, then perhaps here is where it gets a move on from. So yeah, interesting one. And cocoa, the crazy bull market. That is cocoa. Look at that go. So cocoa this year, if you haven't looked at this before, started the year about $4,000, and in the last, a week ago, touched 12.2. All right, so it's a massive move for cocoa. The trend is still up. You know, if I was a buyer now of cocoa, I'd want my stock below at least 10,000. But also, I think it's one of those markets. You know, you can get some wild moves in some of these agricultural commodities. It's one of those markets, I think when it starts to turn, it could really turn quite dramatically, because perhaps there's a lot of leverage in these markets. Let's see what happens with the price of cocoa. And absolutely, yeah, the trend was chugging along. This was to November last year, which was, it was a pretty aggressive trend back then, and I watched it go up and without actually buying it, and then bang, it has gone parabolic this year. So I thought that was interesting. It's always interesting to watch cocoa, see what's going on with that. Coffee was breaking out yesterday. There we go. That's coffee Robusta. So some of these agri markets having a very good year this year. So a good trend there. Orange juice, which was a good one last year, hasn't done a lot this year so far. Orange juice a little bit sideways. And then the likes of palladium and platinum are still looking a little bit down in the dumps, I think. That's palladium going back over the last couple of years. Platinum just not really doing anything. So yeah. So lots to watch. Nickel, why is that in there? What's nickel doing? Okay, yeah, I think that came up in the WhatsApp group. You know, is the price of nickel on the turn? It looks like it could be to me, with this downtrend from nickel, where it halved from Jan 23 into Jan 24, and I do wonder, is it on the turn, nickel? Who knows? Let me shove that up with platinum. So that's it really. So for me next week, what to watch? Well, I think it's interest rates from the US on Wednesday. So clearly the dollar is always an interesting watch. You know, maybe that's the catalyst that brings a bit of momentum back into the dollar. So I think that's an interesting watch. And US stocks, because of what we've seen in April. Are we seeing the turn? No. So far these markets are quite strong on the open. The Nasdaq's up, what is it saying, 300 points from yesterday's close? I suppose it is, isn't it? What was the close yesterday? It was in here, 17,443. Yeah, so it's up 200 and something points from yesterday's close. So let's see what happens where these markets finish. But I think they're interesting to watch. The currency markets, because of the interest rate decision. And of course, if we're going to watch the currencies, then the likes of gold and silver, because they'll be moved around by the dollar, and is oil starting to perhaps get a bit of a move on again. Let's see. But I think even with stock markets, you know, which is a big focus for me because of all of my stock positions at the moment, there's always an awful lot to keep an eye on throughout the week. What's Google? Google's still up 10%. Tesla was an interesting one this week, wasn't it? They came out with earnings this week that weren't brilliant, and the stock rallied. So I would still go short, I must admit. So that was Tesla before earnings closed at 144, and here we are at 168. So what's that? $24. 20, was it 18, 17% move? That looks like an interesting short, I think, Tesla. If I was going to go short Tesla and maybe stops above 185. Anyway, loads to watch as usual next week. Don't forget, if you want to join this webinar on Monday, Wednesday even, successfully day trading US indices Dow, S&P, NASDAQ 100, the stuff I trade every day, going through, planning the trade, what's important, what's not, why people lose, when to take profits, all of that stuff. You just need to be in the WhatsApp group. And if you're in the WhatsApp group, if you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. And it is just a monthly subscription. So you can join, go to the webinar, and then if you think the WhatsApp group doesn't fit your trading style, you can come out here after a month. But that's next week on Wednesday. The link is in the description to this video. Go to the website. Right then, let's have a look. Let's have a look at whatever you would like to look at. Let's bring up these things again. These US markets. What's going on? Still a bit chopperama. Newmont Mining, gold miner. They did have a big move, didn't they? I saw those. I was saying just the other week, wasn't I, about how laggy these gold miners are when the price of gold is going up. And we've got gold at all-time highs. And Newmont in February was at its lowest since April 2019. It was a 4-year low. 5-year low. It's 2024, isn't it? I would go short. That's what I would do. One of my favourite trades on stocks is to go against an extreme move on earnings. So I go short Newmont. So we had been in a downtrend. It has poked through those highs, but I go short. So I go short with a stop of 45. There you go. How decisive is that? So I take the view it's overreacted on earnings and we're going to drift back to perhaps 38, 37 as a minimum target. So that is what I would do. So I'd say, in my view, right, the bigger trend has been down for a year and a bit. All right, it's broken out, but it's a false break driven by those earnings and the market's overreacted. If it broke 45 and I got stopped out, I would completely change my mind and I'd look to buy. But for me at the moment, it's been a nice move off those lows, and those are big historical lows. That's a big old move. It's 30% move, isn't it, off those lows in February? So it's a cracking move. But I wouldn't trust the rally. That's where I would be on that trade at the moment. So let's see. Would you go short US 30 or long bases based on the current price? Well, I traded it this week. I traded the Dow this week. I'll talk more about it in the webinar on Wednesday. But the Dow was showing more relative strength early this week, late last week, than the S&P and the NASDAQ. So what would I do at the moment? I don't know at the moment. If I was doing it, if I was gonna go long at the moment, I think it's an interesting trade. I would put my stop below. Well, 37.2 is the low from early Friday morning when, was it Israel bombed Iran, I think? So that was the out of hours market. The sort of official in hours low for April so far in the Dow is, I think, here. Hang on, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open something else up because I like looking at the markets, particularly US indices, the actual trading hours, and not, obviously the 24-hour market is a 24-hour market, but I do like looking at the indices, the real indices rather than the 24-hour market. So here's the Dow, right, with the 24-hour trading stripped out. So these are these lows from the 17th of April low is about 37.6. So if I was buying the Dow now for a bigger swing higher, I would put a stop below that low because for me, if that low gets taken out, then the risk is we're going back to 37. So I think it's interesting, like all these US markets are at the moment. I think it's interesting. So that would be, I think, my preferred trade at the moment. But this might be a problem. 38.6 was a problem in April, mid-April. It's been a problem again this week on Wednesday. So that's why I think it's absolutely valid to come up with a story for being long or short these US indices at the moment. But I think the Dow is interesting. Can we have a look at WH Smith? WH Smith, the UK retailer of fags and magazines. I'm not sure that's how they position themselves. Ouch, what happened there? Well, I suppose it's down to a historical low, isn't it? It's not one for me because the trend is all a bit down. So it's not one for me. But we're down to October 22 lows. down ahead of £11. So for me, if I was a buyer, I wouldn't buy it today. It's maybe an interesting one for next week, as a bit of a bottom fishing exercise, with a stop the other side of 11 quid. So they've had the results today, have they? So they're negative 42%. So they missed estimates by the looks of it. I don't know. Interesting to see if they settle down. Could be a bargain if anybody fancies that. Not one for me, though. But interesting down at these levels. Coinbase. I'm going to guess. I'm going to take a stab in the dark and say it's been a bit boring the last month because crypto's been boring. It's been a bit drifty. Okay, I'd buy the dip. The question is, do you buy it now or do you wait for a bigger dip? If I was a buyer now, I'd have a stop below 190. But the trend on Coinbase is up for me, so I'd be a buyer. But I wouldn't mind being a little bit patient. DKNG. What is DKNG? Oh, DraftKings. We looked at these, didn't we, the other week? I would buy that. That's what I would do. Again, the only question is where do I stop go? The closest I put my stop would be 36. So the trend is up, isn't it? Bang, 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 bang. Have we had earnings? Earnings is next week. Okay. So perhaps the more patient, the more sensible trade is to wait to get the earnings out of the way and see what happens and then be a buy then. But saying that, I've had some big movers on earnings this week. Boston Scientific. I was in that one anyway. They had earnings coming out and they've gapped higher on earnings. The risk is, of course, if we wait for the earnings to come out, the thing gaps higher and we miss the trades. But that is the game, isn't it? But I think for DraftKings, that is interesting, and I would buy that. Obviously, don't just follow someone blindly on YouTube. But for me, the trend is still up. It's pulled back. Bish, bash, bosh. And Tesla, I said Tesla. I go short Tesla, didn't I? Yeah, so I think Tesla's an interesting short up here with a stop above 190 or something on the basis that the trend is still down. Do you think Aussie dollar against the Swiss franc will enter for another retracement? I don't know. You could make the argument that it's building a base, isn't it? I would make that argument, and I would rather buy a dip than chase it. It'd be interesting to look at next week, but I wonder is this Aussie Swiss franc trend that had been in place since March 22? Is it on the turn? So for me, I think it's interesting, and I'd rather buy a dip, and of course the risk is the dip never comes. Any thoughts on Alibaba? They were breaking out a while ago, weren't they, of their downtrend, and then they did nothing. So let's have a look. What do we think? Oh, they're still doing nothing, aren't they? I remember looking at them back here, whenever that was, Jan 23, so a year ago, thinking they were finally breaking out that downtrend. Their stock price went down a bucket load, didn't it? So this is the Chinese Amazon. Is that one way of describing them? So October 20 highs at 320, down as low as 58. It's just not very exciting, is it? It doesn't really, it's not really doing a lot for me. I would go short. If I had to do anything, I'd go short because for the last, all this year, it's been knocking its head on $78, isn't it? And it can't get through it. So that would be the trade I'd be tempted to do. And that's probably the only thing that's jumping out for me at the moment. What do you think about Aussie dollar on the 1 hour chart? Let's have a look. AUD/USD 1 hour. The trend is up, isn't it? If you looked at the last week, the trend is absolutely up. Be a buyer of the dip. I'd want my stop at least below 64.80. That's what I would do. And then if you looked a bit longer, it's just sort of pushing back into that sideways range, isn't it? So I'd still buy the dip. I'd still be looking for it to go a bit higher from here if I was looking at the 1 hour chart. But then if you look at, there we go, if you look at the last 6 months or so, it's a little bit boring overall, isn't it? But perhaps it's still got 100 points left in it from here. I don't know. So it's not one that appeals to me, but if I looked at that 1 hour, I cannot deny the trend over the last week in the Aussie dollar on that. We looked at dollar yen, didn't we? We had a look at that. Would you go short the Swiss franc against the Polish zloty. Let's have a look. Let's have a look on the dailies. I mean, that has been the sensible trade, isn't it? Over the last 18 months or so. The only problem I've got is that funny spiky move there, isn't there? The only problem I've got is where would you put your stop, or where would I put my stop? And I don't know. I would probably want to be at least 447 if I went short. So yeah, I think the trend is down. It's not a market that I've ever traded, and I probably won't trade, but the trend is down. It's just tricky to know where the stop goes for me on that one. Luna, L-U-N-R. It's not a cryptocurrency, is it? No, it's not. Okay. It looks boring to me. Hang on, that's the hourlies. Look at that. See, what you should have done with Luna is sell out up here. Just a little bit of top trading advice for you. When they were 135, not when they're $5.50. Why? That is a crazy one, isn't it? What's the story with them? There must be a story. Intuitive Machines. Why have they gone so badly? Oh, NASA awarded commercial lunar program. Oh, okay. There you go. That's what they do. I mean, that's nuts, isn't it? Clearly, it looks like a very news-driven thing to me. I mean, it goes from, where did it go? Middle of Feb, it went from $5 to $13, and then back to $5 for the beginning of March. That for me is a casino stock. Yeah, so chuck some money at it, flip a coin, see what happens, and yeah, I think it's very hard to put any sort of sensible spin on that. But yeah, not one for me. That one, I think we could come in next week and it might be $9 and it might be $2. So no, not one for me. Nat Gas contract roll completed today. Okay, fair enough. What do you think about prop trading firms? Are they a viable option for trading, or opinion? Interesting question. I had a discussion with somebody this week I used to work with for many years, and he's been in the business longer than I have. And you see, you see a lot of adverts for prop trading firms over the last 18 months. And basically, if you don't know what it is, it's a virtual prop trading firm. There are some tests you've got to go through, like a period of demo trading that you pay for. And if you meet those tests, you get some money to trade with. They give you an account with some money to trade in. And again, there are quite strict rules. I think, in my reasonably informed opinion, most of it is geared to make sure you're not successful, because the money comes, from my understanding, is the assumption is that most people are going to lose. Completely fair assumption. Yeah, if I opened a broker tomorrow, and if I had deep enough pockets, I wouldn't hedge anything, because I'd assume most of my clients are going to lose. So I'm going to act like a casino. Okay, so I think with prop trading, and if anyone knows better, please put it in the comments. There are quite a few hurdles along the way that make it quite hard. I don't think I would be able to successfully run one of these prop trading accounts, because one of the rules is, or I've seen, I don't know if it's a blanket thing, but drawdowns during the day of a maximum of 5 to 7%. It's absolutely ludicrous. For the way I trade, I regularly have drawdowns bigger than 5%. So I think you've got to do so many trades per day, which again is completely not my approach. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to give it a whirl, and if someone had some feedback that was perhaps a bit different, in principle, it's a good idea. I just think a lot of these firms, and I've never done it, so I don't know, but I know enough people in the industry to have an opinion from them, that it is quite tilted against you. So it's not something that appeals to me to do. Perhaps if somebody did it a bit more ethically or a bit more fairly, I think it's interesting. But I think there are lots of hurdles, because you've got to pay a fee, 300 quid, for example, whatever it is, to go through the process. And if you fail, let's do it again. Do it again in 300 quid. And that generates a lot of cash for the broker. And then you've got to start trading, and you're going to get percentage of profits. We know most people lose, so they're not going to get percentage of profits. And then if they are profitable, there are hurdles along the way, so I think it is difficult. So, but interesting to see how it has got. There are lots of firms who do it over the last 18 months, So yeah, there we go. That's my opinion without having actually done it. But maybe there's somebody who could do it ethically, or is doing it a bit more ethically. Coffee, yeah, we looked at coffee. What do you think of Lululemon? Oh, Lululemon, right? Lululemon came up in the their WhatsApp group where earnings. I thought Lululemon was going to be one of those trades where I'd be able to get in after earnings because they had a big reaction to earnings. So Lululemon, for those of you who aren't familiar, is what's it called? Athletic wear, isn't it? Athletic wear, whatever it's called. Yoga pants. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, big business, obviously. Not for me so much, but yeah, big market and all this stuff, sportswear, leisurewear. And let's walk through what was happening with old Lululemon. So earnings came out. There you go. This is where the earnings came out there. So their trend was up, blah, blah, blah. So Lululemon had gone from $300 in March 2023 to $510 in December, $500 in December. Earnings came out when was it? March. And I thought, oh, this is going to be overreaction to earnings. This is a trade for me. I never did it though because it didn't stop overreacting, and they've absolutely tanker armoured since earnings. So they sold off on the earnings, but they carried on selling off. You know, I do wonder if it's an opportunity now though. So if I was going to do a trade on Lululemon now, and it sort of does appeal, that uptrend is sort of over, but it has hit the lows from June 2023. So we're at, what's that? A 10-month low, a 9-month low, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, if I was a buying out at 366, which seems a reasonable trade, I put a stop the other side of 326 and see how the thing all pans out. So I think it's interesting. So it didn't work out. It didn't happen how I thought it was going to happen when we had that shock on earnings. But given where it's trading now, yeah, it's interesting. These US markets are still strong. I think it's going to be an interesting week next week. If we close above 5100 on the S&P, I think it does set up an interesting week for next week. Let's see. And that's it, I think. If there's no more questions, we're done. So don't forget, if you'd like to come along to this training course, I'm going to talk about stuff I haven't talked about before. How I day trade indices. There you go. It's on Wednesday next week. It will be recorded. So if you can't make it live, you get access to the recording. And all you need to be is part of the WhatsApp group. Yeah. So, and if you're part of the WhatsApp group, you get daily updates and throughout the day from me anyway, which is well worth it for the price of a cup of coffee per day. And you also get access to this webinar on Wednesday night that won't be public. So it is just for people in the group. And if you join the group, you might love the group and stick with it for months. Obviously, that's the reason, one of the reasons I'm doing it for people now who aren't part of the group. If they try the group out to get this webinar, and the webinar is obviously worth more than just a 1-month subscription, they might like the group, and it works for everybody. Okay, so that's the Wednesday. So if you think I do actually know what I'm talking about, which I do, you should do it if you're not in the group already. And a bit of support. There we go. So davidjonestrading.co.uk is where you get all that stuff. Really interesting week. It's been a much better week for me in terms of trading. I think it'd be interesting next week. Let's see where these markets end today. Yeah, it could still go either way, I think, for me today. I think yesterday was an obvious trade. Up here, I'm not so sure. But it'd be interesting to see where it all finishes up. I will wrap things up there. Have a good week. We'll do it all again next Friday, which will be payrolls day, won't it? Next Friday. So we'll do it all again then. Hopefully, if you're not in a WhatsApp group, you join it, and I'll see you for Wednesday night's webinar, which will also be the interest rates. So that'd be interesting anyway. But otherwise, have a good week's trading. Try not to lose all your money, and see you on next Friday. Have a good weekend.